Hello, my name is Jaloric, and welcome to the Update 33 Experimental Overview. First, we'll discuss the new biomes, then cover the changes to the missions, and finally, we'll have a look at all the new wildlife that's been discovered. First of all, let's look at some differences in the space rig. The main change is the overhaul of the mineral trade, where you now have a daily deal and a more intuitive UI.
This is a steal.
Another major change is the mission selection screen, where there are now 2 new biomes, plus the biomes themselves are much more vibrant when you click on them. Some interesting notes about the new biomes. There are now 10 biomes in total, and most of the time, 4 of them are out of range instead of 2. Bismore and Umanite now each have 4 biomes, whereas Jadis and Krappa now have 3, which is up from 2. Speaking of the new biomes, let's start with the Azure Weald. This biome is themed after an ocean or jungle, with purple and blue bioluminescent plants and animals roaming the caves. Most of the plants are new here, and there's quite a few new voice lines too. So notable examples are...
Over here! Maybe I could put it in a pot. This is the Umbra Seeker.
Pretty salads are better than boring salads. Come on. This is called a void basket.
But there are probably a few that I've missed. Some animals found exclusively in this biome are...
The Hexawang Niffa. Pretty wee thing, innit?
Don't want these things to breed with a Mactera.
The Niffer resembles a Fesser flea, although clearly very different, and we'll talk more about angels towards the end of the video. In the Azure Weald, cave generation feels much like what we've seen before, kind of an in-between dense biozone and salt pits. Although usually taller and not quite as wide, almost circular if you looked at a cross-section. Terrain takes 2 hits with a pickaxe and sounds like a normal rock. The other new biome in U33 is the Hollow Bough. This biome is themed after the inside of immense tree-like plants, but deep underground. There is also an invasive species of creeper vine that is tearing up and fighting with these ancient trees for resources. Besides the vines and trees, there are some other plants too. The 2 most notable to me are...
Yes, it's a thorn pot.
Which shoots thorns in the air when destroyed like explosive spores in Sandblasted, and...
It's a goose sack.
which are like the exploding plants if they were goo bombers. The vines come in 3 varieties as far as we could see. Bloated vines, stabbing vines, and creeping vines. The creeping vines are the smallest by far, and retract when damaged into a small hole, only to unravel again later. Bloated vines are part of the terrain, and are covered in spikes that hurt to step on. Some bloated vines also have white spikes that stab at you, much like the Trapatactus from Dead's Biozone. The stabbing vines are essentially melee versions of spitball infectors, which launch 3 spear-like vines at you repeatedly. As for the fauna, not much is of interest here, except for the corpse feeders, which stick out of the walls and are completely harmless, and the new variant of Deeptora, although in around 10 games or so, we did not find any of these Deeptora, so unfortunately I can only tell you that they're very, very rare. In terms of cave generation, the caves here were often very vertical and very, very large. Additionally, the caves here were rarely smooth-walled, instead having bumps and grooves that made it feel much like the bark of a tree. Terrain takes 2 hits with a pickaxe and has a very satisfying woody sound, much like the roots in Fungus Box. Now let's move on to some of the changes to the missions, starting with salvage operation and point extraction. On the fuel cell stage of this mission, there are now cables you have to run similar to the pipelines introduced in U32. These cables do not have to be whacked with a hammer before operation, unlike the pipelines, and also do not have a hitbox that collides with players. You can now hold E on mini-mules to download the leg locations, much like lost equipment. And in the point extraction, the minehead was overhauled. These changes are only minor, but still welcome. In other news, the developers have finally put some effort into making escort missions enjoyable, with a heap of bug fixes and improvements. And apparently as an apology for having to deal with Dottie, management has given us a small pay raise for the escort mission, and according to patch notes, you now get minerals mined XP for mining oil shale. In all seriousness though, I did find that Doretta doesn't leave as big or obnoxious lips on tunnels when entering and exiting the caves, and the beamers do finally work as intended, so that's nice. When the mission is over, Doretta's head pops off her chassis and you can carry her home if you'd like. Now back to the U33 stuff instead of U32.5. Elimination missions are going to be looking quite a bit different from now on, with 2 or 3 new variants of the Dreadnought. And in case you thought that elimination missions were already too easy, even the regular Dreadnought now has increased armor health and will have its armor down for less time than previously. First on the list of new Dreadnoughts is the Dreadnought HiveGaurd. The HiveGaurd is pretty much just a tougher version of the existing Dreadnought, which spawns glyphid sentinels instead of swarmers, which are essentially baby Praetorians, although much uglier. The HiveGaurd shoots fireballs much quicker, does more damage, and has periods of time where it cannot be damaged at all. You have to wait for the flaps of armor to open, hit its 3 weak points, and then its tail will open for a short time for you to do damage to it. Also interestingly, the Glyphid Sentinels are actually quite weak compared to Praetorians, but they can dig terrain much like bulk detonators or oppressors. The other Dreadnought, or Dreadnoughts, are the twins, Lacerator and Arbalest. These Dreadnoughts are actually on par or perhaps a little easier than the normal Dreadnought, as you can deal damage to them even from the front, and they don't have a shield layer to break first. They do, however, have light armor like regular grunts. Lacerator, the melee one, primarily chases down and melee attacks players, with 2 devastating melee attacks, which are similar to the attacks of a bulk detonator and an oppressor. It also shoots fire. Arbalest, the ranged one, primarily stays back and fires projectiles at the players. These projectiles are for the most part quite like Betsy's bombs. Both Dreadnoughts have the ability to dig into the ground and appear elsewhere like the Glyphid Menace, although Lacerator appears to use this more regularly. While both Dreadnoughts are alive, they sometimes do this simultaneously and pop out of the ground connected with a purple healing beam for a few seconds, where they are invulnerable, and afterwards they gain a portion of health and repair their armor. Now that we've looked at Dreadnoughts, let's have a look at some of the other new wildlife you'll be encountering on Hoxies. We've already mentioned the new Deeptora variants, which we were unable to find in the Hollow Bow, but Mactera come in 2 new variants, the Brundle and the Trijaw. The Brundle seems like a normal Mactera with some armor, and the Trijaw shoots 3 slower and less accurate projectiles in a volley. In our 20 or so games we played, we saw the Mactera Trijaw with some regularity, but the Brundle was quite rare, as we only saw it 3 times and twice was in a Mactera plague. The last notable creatures in this update are the Angels. They spawn exclusively in the Azure Weald. They are clearly modeled after stingrays, with large flapping wings and a long tail. They are completely passive, quite similar to cave cruisers. However, when you're near one, you can press E to grab hold and start riding it. It controls with A and D for left and right respectively, S controls pitch up, and W for pitch down. The Angels move faster when going down than up, by quite a large margin. Some other notes with the Cave Angels. If you hit the ground while riding one, it seems that your dwarf just lets go of the angel. Also, much like cave cruisers, they don't have a hitbox that you can stand on. However, you can grab one from above. You can also bounce on another dwarf who is riding one if you want to have 2 or more dwarves ride one. Unfortunately, the new Mactera and Angels do not have a complete bestiary entry at this time. Finally, to finish this video off, there are some more notable miscellaneous changes. Molly finally has a docking animation. Her hatch opens and an arm comes out with a magnet or tractor beam on the end, which grabs Molly and brings her inside. It also does this to each mini-mule. The amount of nitra that occurs in deep dives has been reduced by around 15%, so we might actually have to care about nitra in the last stage now. There have been no weapon buffs or debuffs so far, and there have been plenty of bug fixes. To see the full changelog, I recommend going to the DRG official Discord server and reading #changelist only for experimental. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe, as I hope to release updated videos detailing each experimental version as it nears release, and you can catch it early if you're subscribed. If I missed anything important in this video, please let me know in the comments, and if you'd like to see some more content in the new biomes, you can go to my Twitch page at twitch.tv/Jaloric, and we're going to be streaming the new biomes as much as possible this week. Hope to see you around. Rock and Stone.